A war fought from above Afghanistan is a country where distance defines everything. Mountain ranges stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Roads are scarce, and weather can isolate entire regions without warning. For military forces operating there, ground movement is slow and often vulnerable. Reinforcement by land can take hours, sometimes days. From the earliest stages of the conflict, air power became the most reliable way to overcome that distance. Aircraft crossed terrain in minutes that ground forces struggled to traverse in a day. Over time, another pattern emerged: jets, turboprops, and unmanned aircraft did not simply arrive, strike, and leave. They stayed. Fighters orbited above valleys. Surveillance aircraft traced movement along roads and ridgelines. Drones remained overhead long after ground units had settled into position. Air power became a constant presence rather than a temporary response. This was not how most air campaigns had been fought. Traditionally, aircraft launched to hit specific targets at specific times. In Afghanistan, the requirement was different. Persistence, not speed, became the defining feature of air operations. The challenge was not reaching the battlefield quickly, but already being there. And that raises a central question. How did air power evolve into an always available, persistent force over Afghanistan? In the immediate aftermath of September 11th, U.S. air operations focused on precision strike and strategic disruption. Aircraft targeted Taliban and Al-Qaeda infrastructure, training sites, and command nodes across the country. Long-range bombers and carrier-based aircraft projected power into a landlocked theater with remarkable speed. At the same time, the ground footprint was limited. Small teams of special operations forces and intelligence personnel operated alongside Afghan partners. These units relied heavily on air support for mobility, firepower, and coordination. Air power enabled rapid success in the opening phase. Precision-guided munitions compensated for limited numbers on the ground. Aircraft provided effects that would otherwise have required large conventional formations. But as operations expanded, limitations became clear. Airstrikes could disrupt and defeat fixed targets, but they could not provide continuous awareness. Once aircraft departed, the situation on the ground became harder to see and harder to influence. As the conflict transitioned from an initial campaign to a prolonged fight, air power needed to evolve beyond episodic strikes. 3. Afghanistan imposed demands unlike those of previous conflicts. Its geography restricted visibility and communication. Mountainous, terrain-limited line of sight, and made artillery support difficult to employ consistently. Insurgent forces adapted to these conditions. They operated in small, decentralized groups, avoiding fixed positions. Engagements were brief and unpredictable, often occurring far from major bases or supply routes. Ground units frequently operated in isolation. In contact situations, response time mattered more than volume of fire. A delay of minutes could determine whether an engagement escalated or ended. Traditional air support launched after a request was often too slow. By the time aircraft arrived, insurgent forces could disengage or disappear into terrain and population. The solution was not more aircraft launches. It was aircraft already overhead, observing, communicating, and ready to act. This necessity drove a doctrinal shift toward persistence. In traditional air doctrine, success is measured in sorties, flown and targets struck. In Afghanistan, those metrics mattered less than time on station. Aircraft were increasingly tasked to loiter for extended periods rather than strike pre-planned targets. Fighters, surveillance platforms, and drones orbited areas of responsibility, maintaining constant awareness. Air crews became integrated into ground operations. They monitored patrol routes, observed villages, and tracked movement patterns over time. Rather than reacting to events, they anticipated them. This continuous presence reduced response times dramatically. When troops made contact, aircraft were often already overhead, already familiar with the terrain and the situation. Air power became an extension of ground command, not a distant supporting arm. That transformation depended on the aircraft and systems capable of sustaining it. Cinco aircraft and systems that enabled persistence fixed-wing. Close air support aircraft played a central role in persistent operations. Their ability to loiter, operate at relatively low speeds, and deliver precise fires made them well suited to Afghanistan's environment. These platforms could remain overhead for long periods, observe terrain visually and through sensors, and respond quickly when ground forces required support. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft formed the backbone of persistent air support. Equipped with electro-optical and infrared sensors, these platforms provided continuous coverage over wide areas. Their mission was not to strike, but to watch. They monitored roads, valleys, and settlements, building pattern of life, understanding over time. This persistent awareness allowed ground commanders to make informed decisions before contact occurred. Unmanned aircraft added a new dimension to persistence. Long-endurance drones could remain airborne far longer than manned platforms, providing uninterrupted observation. Some were armed, allowing for immediate action when authorized. More often, they served as persistent sensors, complementing manned aircraft rather than replacing them. Across all platforms, persistence mattered more than speed. Sensors were often more decisive than weapons, and persistent air support depended on seamless coordination between air and ground forces. Forward air controllers and joint terminal attack controllers served as the critical link. Communication was continuous. Air crews and ground units shared information in real time, often over many hours. This constant dialogue built shared situational awareness. Over repeated missions, aircrews developed familiarity with specific regions and units. They learned terrain features, civilian patterns, and friendly movements. Judgment improved with time and continuity. Trust became essential. Ground forces relied on air support not just for firepower, but for awareness and reassurance. Aircrews relied on ground controllers for context and clarity. Persistent air support was as much a human system as a technological one. The impact of persistent air support was tangible. Ground units maneuvered with greater confidence, knowing that observation and support were immediately available. The constant presence of aircraft altered insurgent behavior. Prolonged engagements became riskier when air support was already overhead. Movement patterns changed in response to surveillance. When employed correctly, persistent air support improved precision. Continuous observation provided context that reduced the risk of error and collateral damage. Most critically, reduced response times saved lives. Aircraft already on station could act quickly when troops came under fire. Air power did not resolve every challenge, but it reshaped how ground operations were conducted. Persistent air support came at a significant cost. Maintaining continuous coverage required a high operational tempo. Aircraft, crews, and support personnel faced sustained strain over many years. Ground forces also became accustomed to constant air presence. Insomicas's reliance on air support influenced how operations were planned and executed. At a strategic level, air power could not replace political solutions or local governance. Persistent air support improved security and survivability, but it could not resolve the underlying causes of conflict. Afghanistan highlighted both the power and the limits of air dominance in irregular warfare. Afghanistan reshaped how air power is used. It shifted emphasis from speed to endurance, from reaction to presence. From isolated strikes to continuous support, aircraft became more than weapons. They became watchers, communicators, and partners on the battlefield. Sensors mattered as much as ordnance. Time on station mattered more than time to target. Persistent air support did not decide the war, but it permanently changed how air power is integrated into modern conflict. In Afghanistan, air power was no longer something that arrived when called. It was already there. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more interesting videos.